I don't know what to say now. I guess I'll talk about my co-author, Frank Ogden.
Tell us about your boyfriend.
He has a vagina, actually. So every time Frank would meet a female friend of mine, he would say, have you ever made love hanging from a chandelier? And she would say no, and he'd say, you're running in the wrong circles. He died recently. He was 91, but another story is he had during an LSD session, he had a patient who had never had an orgasm in her life. And he put his hand on hers, and by the time he got to here, she had an orgasm, first orgasm in her life. And she was at a dinner party later, about a few months later, and she said, you're not going to do that again, are you? My mic cut out already, my punchline there. So. Sorry, Frank. Let's see, what else can I tell you about Frank? Frank was licensed in 50 aircraft and seacraft. He flew for the Canadian Air Force. He actually flew across Canada in 1967 for the centennial, and he flew down to Barry Goldwater's house, and he parked his helicopter like 5 feet away from his house, which is apparently not you're not supposed to do that. And he hops out of his helicopter. He's like, "Where's the party?" Yeah. That was the kind of guy Frank was. At one point he was stationed in Gander, and he was a flight engineer, so he was responsible for a whole fleet of aircraft. And one of the tail wings had become damaged, and Churchill was flying through on his way in, and he stops off at Gander. So Frank says, "Well, that tail wing's damaged, so just swap that one out for Churchill's. We'll put that on Churchill's plane. No problem." And he did it, and it was fine, and everybody got extra R&R and money and everything. So. Frank went to Haiti after he worked at Hollywood Hospital, and then he actually started one of the first FM radio stations in Montreal. And then he went to Haiti to study voodoo, and he gave them a bunch of money to buy kitchen utensils and basic necessities. Not much money goes a long way in Haiti. And he was about 35 years later. This is when I knew him. Frank actually had started one of the first websites one of the first 200 websites in the world. He was a futurist. He changed his name to Dr. Tomorrow. He didn't change his name legally, but he called himself Dr. Tomorrow. And he bought drtomorrow.org, drtomorrow.net, drtomorrow.ca, whatever. And he had a dream that Danbala, which is the snake god in Haiti, came to him and said, "You're going to be rewarded for your generosity." And the next day he sold drtomorrow.ca for $5,000. So. Now, all of Frank's stories may be considered Irish facts, which are like regular facts, only better. So, you got to take that into consideration. But, Frank wasn't a therapist. He owned he owned an airplane company, and he sold half of it. He read about LSD and McLean's, and he sold half of it. And he came to Vancouver, and he said, "I'll work for you for 3 weeks, and then you see if you can afford me." And he was on the payroll, and that's how things started. So he worked there from 1963 to 1968, which at the time, LSD psychotherapy was actually quite common. There was about 15 different teams around the world. Stanislav Grof left Prague, Czechoslovakia in 1967 to give a talk, and then the Soviets rolled in, so he stayed. But when he left, there were 17-bed locked ward exclusively devoted to LSD psychotherapy. There were 40,000 subjects, 2,000 papers published, 100 medical textbooks published, exclusively on LSD psychotherapy. So this was a big thing. But at the same time, drugs like Valium or diazepam, Thorazine, and imipramine, the antidepressant, were emerging. So people thought, why mess with all this religio, mystico nonsense and transformation when we've got these drugs now? Imagine how great they're going to be in 2017. Not that great. So, what are my credentials to write this book? That's a good question that no one's asked yet, because you're all my friends from yoga, so they're a ridiculously friendly audience that I have been dealing with. But my credentials were a traumatic childhood and a mood disorder. That's why I am able to write this. Without that, none of this would be happening right now. So, if you have a mood disorder or a traumatic childhood, your response to psychedelics is actually quite different. Now, what psychedelics do is they deconstruct your reality. There's a network of brain circuits called the controlled node network. And they do imaging studies with LSD and psilocybin, and they were quite surprised to see that brain activity had actually been reduced under the influence of the drug. So what they determined was that this controlled node network is actually being inhibited. And what that does is it allows different areas of the brain to communicate with each other and unusual experiences to emerge. So what Groff's theory was that the brain becomes an inner radar, and it gravitates to its areas of highest emotional charge. And so there's 3 levels to the unconscious for Groff. There's the biographical, which would be primarily trauma, abuse, surgeries, accidents, and then the perinatal, which I talked a little bit about, bliss, despair, rage, liberation, and then there's the transpersonal. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But what happened with me is I took Prozac in 1993. I was 8, and keep making that joke. And oh yeah, okay. That always happens at the most inopportune times. Maybe I'll just hold it for a bit here. Okay. So it was very successful for me. So then I went off of it, and then I started taking it again. But I actually went to, I've been taking it maybe a week, and I went to my girlfriend's place in Hamilton, smoked one of my first joints, and had a panic attack. Had a couple more panic attacks, lost a bunch of weight, dropped out of university. I was having a hard time. And then a year later, I was switched to a different drug called dizipramine, which is an antidepressant that works on noradrenaline rather than serotonin. So it's a completely different chemical. And I took psilocybin the second time I'd ever taken it, and I was on my way to a party called Who's Your Daddy in the Glebe. It sounds like a joke, but it's actually not at all. I took we were actually hanging out at my friend's place before this party, and he had liberated a magazine rack. And one of the magazines was called Omni, which is a science magazine. And in that magazine, there was an article by Albert Hofmann, who was the chemist who discovered LSD. And he describes how he laments its descent into the unsupervised, unscientific underground. But he said it showed promise for alcoholism and depression. And I thought, why would hallucinations and uncontrollable laughter be therapeutic? Curious. Meanwhile, the anxiety is mounting and mounting and mounting and mounting. Whereas before, it's almost as though your body can only maintain panic for so long before it becomes physiologically exhausted, and then you relax, but then the cognition occurs to you, this has just happened and it could happen again, and then it returns. But this wasn't happening. It wasn't stopping. It was just accelerating and ascending. And it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and I said to my friend, give me the keys to your apartment. I'm going to go back to your place. I got some Lectopam, which is like a diazepam, Valium kind of drug. I just hope I don't hurl myself off a bridge on the way back, because it was a terrible experience. And my friends are like, we're like 21 years old. They're like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? Come on. We're at a party. We're just going to go outside, breathe some fresh air. So I said, okay. I was sweating, and I was white as a ghost, and the cupboards were melting, and I was nauseous, and it was awful. And I went outside, and I sat on a hydro box, took a couple of breaths, and it was just this epic decompression. It was as though total relaxation, like a cellular release. It was an extraordinary experience. To this day, I can't forget it. It was the most amazing, remarkable thing that I've ever experienced to this day. And then I became curious about it, and I was better. I was happy. I was spiritual. I was grounded. It was absolutely amazing. So I went to the university, and I started reading about LSD. And then in 1996, I came across LSD psychotherapy by Stanislav Grof. And he describes these perinatal matrices. So the first matrice is the BPM1, which is intrauterine bliss, where the fetus is in a symbiotic union with the maternal organism. This is perfect. Hello. BPM2 is where the womb collapses, and the fetus is trapped with no exit. This would be despair. BPM3 is when the cervix dilates and the fetus engages in a life or death struggle down the birth canal. And then BPM4 is when the baby is born. So it's basically, the way I look at it, this isn't Grof's thing, but it's bad or good yin, BPM1, bliss, bad yin, BPM2, despair, bad yang, rage, good yang, liberation. So, I can't remember what I was planning on saying after that. This is good to have this tablet, because you don't have to worry about remembering things. you do have to worry about not looking like you know what you're talking about. So the next level of the unconscious is the transpersonal unconscious. And this might be interesting for yoga people because this is the spiritual kind of level. I haven't actually got there yet, but I'm working at it. 15 years of teaching, not really. But this would be past lives, identifying with animals, plants, archetypes, spiritual experiences generally, metacosmic void, clear white light, psychic phenomena. And this is what Patanjali called siddhis. And he regarded these as essential on the path to enlightenment. And he said that they could be attained through sadhana or spiritual practice, but also through light-bearing herbs. So that was what Patanjali had to say about that. So if you keep doing your yoga or take acid, you will develop psychic powers. And if you don't, you can just blame Patanjali. I want to close this part with a couple of experiences from the book that I think are quite interesting. The first is, this one was an alcoholic in her 50s, and this session actually took place in the 1950s before people really were very good at it. And her reaction is totally defensive and evasive, but it's absolutely hilarious. So at 8:55, they gave her 600 micrograms of LSD. Now, a street hit of acid is about 50 to 100 micrograms of LSD. So this would be 6 to 12 hits. And she's 9:45. I'm not feeling very good. 9:50. I'm hot. Too much. I've got to get out of here. This is terrible. Too hot. Ask patient how she is. I'm all right, thank you. All right. Oh, this is crazy. Shame on you. Wringing hands, gritting teeth. This is crazy. No more. Nope. I'm hot enough, thank you. No more. Crazy. Oh, crazy. Say, stop that. Ask patient how she is. Very well, thank you. This is crazy. I don't want it. Stupid. It isn't right. Terrible, the heat. No, I've always lived in the same old climate. How are you doing? Very well, thank you. Are you learning anything? Not a thing. Nope. Get out. Go on. It's crazy. A bunch of sap. Silly. Too hot. It's terrible. I want to go home. No more. I've had enough. Let's get out. It's not funny. You tell me something about it. I don't know a damn thing. I could sit here the whole day and night. Somebody move something. Crazy, silly, just as crazy as the birds. Come on. 12:45. Come on, let's get going. Sitting around doing nothing all day, driving me crazy. I don't know, a bunch of bunk. So that would not be considered successful psychedelic therapy. Probably fairly harmless things. But this guy is the paradigm of a successful session. This guy was in his mid-20s. He was about to go to graduate school. Reasonably well-adjusted guy. He stuttered, but he had conflicts around relationships and school and stuff like that. He was a pretty normal guy. 850, 325 micrograms of LSD and 325 milligrams of mescaline. So they usually gave both drugs. The argument is that LSD provides a lot more conceptual material and outlines of the visual material, and mescaline provides more affect or charge and more color to the visions. This is the argument. 9:05, therapist. Go with it. Let the music take you. Patient. I feel a slight queasy feeling. Points to throat. He has a moderate degree of congestion. Patient. I just had an insight now. Incredible. As if the whole world were an ether cone. Incredible. So I don't know, maybe if you're older, back in the day, I don't know, maybe they still do this, I don't know, but I had a surgery when I was 5, and you lay back and they put an ether, it's not really a cone in my case, it was this black bag, and they said count down from 10, and 10, 9, 8, and you don't remember anything else. So he's reliving this surgery. Actually, surgeries leave quite an imprint, according to Groff, on the unconscious. 9:40, patient, is that all coming from myself? He's reliving the ether cone from the tonsillectomy. Therapist, let it come. Let it try and destroy you, and you'll find out it can't. 9:50, patient feels nauseous, music turned up louder. So this would be a technique to try to accelerate the process. Therapist, let the ether cone press on you completely, and perhaps you can come through it, not from under it. 10:05, patient, I'm trying to grasp the concept of what you're doing. Therapist, work over this hostility to parents. Where do they come into it? They left you to the horror of fear, but you are the one who reacted to it. You put it there. Go back under the cone. I want some human support. And this goes on for a while. And then 11:30 to 12:30, the next hour was replete with constant questioning by patient, ending in overt hostility to both patients. 12:35, patient, you miserable bastards, figments of imagination. Who is holding me back? Therapist, only ourselves. McDonald, you miserable sniping bastard. McDonald, you enema bag. McDonald was the resident psychiatrist. Cassius M. Clay, Archie Moore, James Meredith. Does anybody know who Cassius M. Clay is? That was Muhammad Ali before. So that's how old this session was. This is before he changed his name. These are all fighters. So that's that BPM-3. That's the rage. Therapist, no more than you are. You're the devil, he says, no more than you are. And then the session ends. And this is his post-treatment. This is where you find out what happened during the session. If you just take notes and observe someone externally, you have no idea. But when they tell you, then you know. It's very subjective and internal. I started to feel the effects of the drug quickly. As I lay down, I felt nauseous. Soon I had the feeling that I was under an ether cone. It was suffocating me, and the nausea swelled and felt like a choking mass anchored in my throat. I knew that this was the experience I must have gone through as a child when I had my tonsils out at 2.5 years of age. I struggled with the ether, but I could not let it completely devour me. I felt the whole world was an ether cone. I recalled existing in the real world, and I began to reestablish connection with it. This was the ultimate suffering. I was in hell. Everything I had suffered in the real world, or anything I could suffer in the future, was as heaven compared with this paranoid hell. Finally, exhausted from my efforts, both verbal and physical, I gave up the struggle. As I gave up the fight, things seemed to become more pleasant. The therapists now seemed like friendly figures, humorous and very solicitous of the poor subject. Now the room seemed clothed in a magnificence of color and detail. The air seemed infinitely fresh and cooling, and I smelled wonderful food. I heard godly music on incomparable speakers. I shall never forget the quality of this heavenly music. Even though I suffered through hell, I am glad I went through the experience and would go through it again. It somehow makes me feel stronger to know that I suffered what I suffered and could not be destroyed. I feel very calm now and have experienced no fear of any kind since this session. Follow-up 6 months later. First of all, let me say that I think the psychedelic treatment was tremendously beneficial to me. I might even go so far as saying it was the turning point in my life and as such the key event in my short existence. The experience started a process of development in me that is still continuing. When I came to you, I was a hopelessly static, enormously fearful person who was holding on to reality by my fingernails. I felt that my life as a functioning member of society would shortly be over. Although I have not by a long shot overcome my feelings of alienation and fear, I progress every day by the experience of life itself rather than hopeless repetition of neurotic patterns. One thing that has puzzled me, and is one of the reasons why I have not written before this, is how such a monstrously hideous experience could lead to such positive results. This question has plagued me. This is why I always hesitated to write you that I had been helped. Fascinating character. So those are two experiences of the book. There's about 35 in the book. So if you check it out, you'll get to see a bunch of ones like that. Bliss, despair, rage, liberation. Rock and roll theater in 4 acts. We're going to take a little break, and then Moby Dick is going down.